I think we can all agree that the price of the SH Monster Arts Shimo is much higher than people would expect to pay for the figure that they get. Now, if we had a magic wand that we could just wave and cut that price in half, I think $120 for Shimo is much more digestible and would be really nice for the size of figure that you get. But somehow, Hiya Toys has come in with their own magic wand, waved it, cut the price in half again, and has delivered a figure that's 95% of the way there in terms of articulation, in terms of size, for $60. If you've been paying attention to the larger action figure market, Hiya Toys is not the only one that's disrupting it. Fans of the Pacific Rim franchise have been treated to the Ling action figure line, consistently delivering high quality action figures with electronics, with magnets, with really high quality paint applications, and a boatload of accessories. Earlier this year, a new company called InArts was making waves throughout the community by soliciting a really high quality Batman figure for just $51 over in China. So all of this begs the question, how are these Chinese companies coming in and disrupting the action figure market in such monumental ways? That's what I'd like to talk about today, but before I do that, there's something very important I have to do. That's right, gang, I am tinfoiling the hat because I have some ideas. I have no idea if they're correct, and I don't want any of you going out there saying, oh, KaijuCanuck said the highest cheap because of this. I don't actually know, I just have some ideas. I'd love to kickstart this conversation, and if any of you have more information that I might have missed or want to add on, please do so in the comments down below. Let's all learn something. Through some of the conversations I've had and some of the research that I've conducted on my own, one thing that keeps coming up is the idea that the Chinese government subsidizes a lot of its domestic manufacturers. Basically, what that means is that if you're building a company or a business that aligns with the Chinese government's goals, they'll kick in some money to help you along the way. We can't really get a good idea of how much money they might be investing in subsidies, but we can get an idea, rough ballpark, by looking at other countries. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the OECD, that is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, estimates that Chinese steel subsidies are 5 times higher than non-OECD countries and as much as 10 times higher than OECD countries. Basically, the OECD is a group of countries that work together towards the goals of economic growth, employment, and rising living standards. Notably, China is not part of the OECD. The CSIS even claims that some of these subsidies allow companies to operate at a loss because they know that the government will step in to keep them afloat and help them break even through these subsidies. That just seems like a lot of money, man, and I don't know if there's any expectation of them paying it back. But now let's tie this back to toy production. If we take a look at this cost breakdown from an independent American toy Kickstarter campaign, we can see that tooling, which is the process of making the steel molds, takes up more than half of the total production cost. And even though this is from a different toy line, we know from the interviews that have been done on this channel that this pricing is about right, so we can make it apply widely. Tooling alone can cost tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so if some of the steel that were involved in making the tooling were subsidized, that could go a long way in bringing the overall production costs down. It turns out it doesn't actually stop there. The Australian Institute of International Affairs claims that the Chinese economy is so saturated with domestic steel production that this excess steel supply is now being flooded into the international market and undercutting the steel from a lot of other countries. Quote, "It is possible that the purpose of the subsidies is to outcompete and drive out foreign producers." Does that sound familiar to you? That sounds a lot like what Hiya is doing to Monster Arts. And it's not just steel. According to an organization named Plastics for Change, China's spending over $11 billion in subsidizing plastic production. So between subsidized steel and subsidized plastic, we are now talking about 2/3, 67%, of an action figure's production costs being heavily discounted. And if we look at the rest of the costs, we're talking labor, design, management, but we all know that the cost of labor over in China is way lower than it is in the US and in Japan. So it's likely that there's even more savings there. We are now talking about a situation where up to 85% of the cost of making an action figure is significantly, if not tremendously, subsidized by the Chinese government. Suddenly the price tag on that Shimo is making a little bit more sense. Now here's a question. If China really is producing all this steel and all this plastic, why can't American or Japanese producers make use of some of these subsidized resources just like the Chinese companies can? To that I would say China doesn't need to offer these incentives to them. They don't really need to compete. I think we all know that the only other competitor worth talking about in the toy market is Vietnam. And if you have an action figure from Vietnam, at best, it's a product that's not quite there. So I don't think they need to win you over by lowering the cost. And I don't think they feel inclined to use their own government's money to do that. Now, am I only going to hold Haya accountable for the price gap between their Shimo and the Monster Art Shimo? No. Bandai slapped a premium web exclusive label on the entire cast of Godzilla Kong: The New Empire. I'm not saying that I blame them, because when that first trailer came out, the dislike ratio was quite high, much higher than I was expecting at least. But this meant that those prices were already about 25%, give or take, higher than they probably would have been as a general release. Knocking Shimo down 25% brings her in around $190 US. And when you compare that to something like Godzilla -1, which was another general release at the $140 mark, $190 seems way more reasonable for just how big of a figure she is. Plus, the Japanese yen is still relatively weak, even though it is on the way up. And as we've heard from Brian Flynn, Chinese factories charge in US dollar, and they are probably not going to cut Japan any kind of break. And look, I get it, like, these are just theories. At the end of the day, these things are path independent, and that's to say, the vast majority of customers that are buying these things don't care why Haya figures are so much more affordable. They only care that Haya figures are so much more affordable. But with the recent Heat Ray Godzilla 99 figure coming in at $4 more than the standard Haya MSRP we're used to, I'm really just trying to enjoy these things while they're here to last, because you never know when the good times are going to come to an end. That's going to be it for me, but I'm curious to hear from you. Is there any other information that you have to contribute to the conversation as to how Haya or any of these other Chinese companies are undercutting everybody so severely? I'm really curious. Please let me know in the conversation down below, and let's get talking. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.